The story begins with Nick Hume, a wealthy man with a lovely wife, Helen, who is happily and peacefully raising their two sons, Brendan and Lucas, in a suburban area. They have record tapes from Nick and Helen's early marriage to raising their teenage boys. Brendan, the older son, is a good hockey player who has won trophies, while Lucas falls behind and plays football. But despite their differences, they love each other.
Don't call him an idiot. Lucas, you have a loyal and loving brother.
One night, after witnessing Brendan's fantastic performance, Nick drives his son home. On the way, Brendan convinces Nick to enroll him in a college in Canada, since most of his friends plan to go there. While they bond in the car, they notice a gang crew drive by. So Nick dims his car lights so he doesn't attract trouble. Still, the vehicles linger around, and just when Nick thinks he's out of their way, his vehicle runs out of gas, so he goes to the nearby gas station. Brendan quickly seizes the opportunity to get some snacks.
We'll quick in and out, because we gotta get home. Alright.
And Nick calls Helen to inform her of their son's thoughts on playing hockey in Canada. Suddenly, the gang from before shows up to rob the station. One of them shoots the cashier, and the others rile up one of their members to stab Brendan as an initiation ritual. Nick tries to stop them, but a vehicle knocks him down, and left powerless. He watches the horror unfold. The thugs quickly take off, but Nick struggles with the perpetrator and unmasks him before he gets away. The crew abandons the criminal, and a car takes him out like a bowling pin. Quickly, Nick rushes to his bleeding son and cries for help, holding him in his hands while the gang mocks the newbie they abandoned. Shortly, Nick rushes Brendan to the hospital, and he's taken to the emergency room. He then phones his family and informs them, and they show up only to hear that Brendan didn't make it. Days later, a group of suspects is lined up at the station, and Nick is told to identify Brendan's killer. He points out the murderer, and the cops tell him the killer is Joe Darley. While dealing with the court case, Nick buries his son and informs his wife about Joe, and she hopes he rots in jail. Later that night, Helen sobs in Nick's arms, while Lucas goes to Brendan's room and mourns him. The bereaved mourn Brendan that night after his burial. The next day, Nick learns from his lawyer, Jessica Wallace, a detective, that Brendan was murdered as an initiation ritual. The lawyer explains how difficult the case is.
That's worth more than chasing some make-believe 10 to life and the guy walks free. You want that?
Since they need another witness to testify, and the gas station they went to had no CCTV. The prosecutor tells Nick they'll offer a plea deal to avoid a weak case going to trial. Later that day in court, Nick watches as Joe shows no remorse, and frustrated by the justice system, Nick intentionally recants his testimony to prevent the plea deal. As a result, Joe is released from custody and allowed to walk free.
I'm dismissing this case.
As Joe walks out of the station, his elder brother Billy and the rest of the gang pull up to celebrate with him. They rejoice and pick him up, but little do they know that Nick is watching and that they're cooked. He angrily tails them to where they dropped Joe off. Later that night, as Nick goes through his garage looking for a knife to enact his plan, Lucas walks in on him and touches the troubling subject, inquiring to know where Brendan was killed and if he was scared. Half-heartedly, Nick answers him and brushes the subject aside. He wraps the knife in a cloth and hides it, but Helen enters, asking if Joe got locked up. Nick tells her that the court let Joe go, and when she starts asking him why, he doesn't get into details. He then vents to her that he cannot do anything about it. He apologizes and hurries off into the dark. Later, he arrives at Joe's residence and sees the killer taking out the trash bags. Nervously, Nick leaves his vehicle and walks into the vicinity. But a lady sees him, so he dilly-dallies his way into an alley, where Joe currently smokes a cigarette and dumps the bins. As soon as Joe turns around, he wets his pants upon seeing Nick, but then calms down and wonders if Nick followed him. Way past his redeeming point, Nick pounces on him, and as the two of them struggle, Nick uses the knife on Joe, killing him in the process. Shocked by the realization of what he has done, he takes out the knife and drives off. On the way, he gets rid of the evidence. He then returns home and sees Helen and Lucas packing up Brendan's stuff and the recordings. They see him beat up, and Helen worriedly checks him out, so he lies to her that he fell and also cut his hand.
It's okay, I cut my hands.
Minutes later, while taking a shower, Nick breaks down crying and apologizes to Helen, and she rushes to console him.
I'm so sorry.
The next day, Billy goes to his dad's place to hand him some money from his gang's recent expedition. But the old man gets mad at him for delivering little cash. After all, he knows Billy has been stealing. He then threatens to shoot Billy if such an occurrence repeats itself.
Can't get the fuck out of my sight.
Billy then leaves to meet with his crew, but he sees they are all gloomy, so he asks them what's up, and they tell him Joe is dead.
He's dead.
Unable to believe them, he leaves to find Joe. Nick, on the other hand, appears to be doing fine at work after enacting his vengeance on his son's killer. On getting the news about Joe's death, Jessica shows up at Nick's office and informs him.
The guy we thought killed your son, somebody killed him.
And judging by his reaction and the injury on his hands, he suspects he knows something. At Billy's crew's base, they mourn Joe's death, but Billy finds it very hard to let it slide, since Joe is his blood brother. At first, he takes out his frustration on them.
Why don't you show a little fucking respect at least?
But one of them stands up to him and condemns his behavior, letting him know that they all feel the same. He finally calms down and asks around for clues regarding the killer, and one of his gang members tells him that his sister saw someone suspicious on the night of the murder.
That she saw some fucker in a suit down there.
Billy picks up a newspaper with Nick's face and gives it to his gang member to show his sister. Once she looks at the image, she confirms it to be the person she saw the previous night. Nick, on the other hand, heads home after closing from work, but notices the gang members stalking him and getting close to him in broad daylight. So he takes a swing at the closest with his bag and then runs off. They give him a hot chase. They shoot at him and follow him through buildings. But his middle-aged legs give them a tough chase. Nick eventually gets into a garage and trips most of the car's alarms to confuse his pursuers. After thinking he had gotten away, one of them shows up with a gun, so Nick hides and attacks him. The thug fires all his bullets while trying to gun Nick down, but Nick jumps into a vehicle, so the thug follows suit to kill him. As they wrestle in the vehicle, Nick breaks the windshield, and they mistakenly lower the handbrake. This causes the vehicle to obey gravity and head down the slopey path. But just before the vehicle tumbles off the railings, Nick sees where it's headed and quickly crawls out of it, resulting in the dumb thug's death. Upon hearing the commotion and seeing their member's death, the other gang members head upstairs to kill Nick, but he quickly escapes in his car and zooms out of their sight. After getting away from them, he calls Helen to ask if she's okay, but she informs him that Lucas hasn't returned home.
Look, I gotta call you back. I think I know where he is.
Worried, Nick drives around looking for his son. He goes to the gas station where the murder incident happened and sees Lucas there, so he orders him to get into the vehicle. But Lucas breaks down, feeling frustrated that his father preferred Brendan.
Look, get in that goddamn car right now! Right now!
Nick, who has had a hell of a day and doesn't want to be spotted by the gang members, yells at Lucas as strictly and as loud as possible to get into the vehicle. He then drives them home. Later that day, Billy gets his hands on Nick's wallet, which must have slipped during the pursuit. He examines it and learns of Nick's address and his family. The following day, he sends one of his members to deliver a package to Nick. The gang member walks into the company, defying the security and mildly causing a commotion before handing Nick the package. As the guards grab him to kick him out, he threatens Nick that he'll meet his maker.
You'll get your race all over when you finally meet your maker.
After the commotion dies down, Nick opens up the package and sees his photo of his family crossed with a pin. He then sees a phone number, so he dials it, and Billy picks up, telling Nick that he gets to decide who lives and who dies. Angry, Nick threatens to kill anyone who comes at his family, like he did to Joe. Billy then corrects him that Joe was his brother, and he'll be coming for his family.
And I will cut out your goddamn guts like I did your fucking friend. Do you hear me? You just bought them a death sentence, motherfucker.
He hangs up the call, and Nick starts hyperventilating. He hurriedly fumbles for Jessica's contact and calls his wife to confirm if she's home. He runs out of the office and tells Helen to stay at home.
Why? What's wrong?
On his way home, he calls Jessica and informs her that Billy Darley is after his family. Immediately as Nick gets home, he locks the windows and the doors, ignoring Helen's questions. And he waits for the detective to show up. Once Jessica does, she asks him how he got Billy pissed, but he refuses to open up. Left with nothing to work with, Jessica leaves him, but he runs after her and asks her to help him protect his family, and he doesn't care what happens to him. She then tells him to do as she instructs.
I just need them to be safe. Tell me how to stop this.
That night, Helen speaks to Nick, scolding him for trying to balance the equation, but he blames himself for Brendan's death. She disagrees with him, calling him a good father, and he hugs her before she goes to bed.
And nothing that's happened changes that.
Later that night, while keeping watch, Nick realizes that Billy's gang has killed the cop patrolling their house. Before he can arm himself, they break into his house and attack him and his family with their guns. Nick tries his best to fend them off, but they shoot his son and his wife before his eyes and finally shoot him. Time passes, and Nick wakes up in the hospital, terribly injured and struggles to get out of bed, but the doctors sedate him. Later, he wakes up and recalls losing his family. Fortunately, Jessica tries to talk some sense to him.
Everybody thinks they're right in a war.
Informing him to give up on revenge, and she can have him jailed if he's that locked in. She insists that he shouldn't squander the second chance God gave to him, but Nick tells her there's no point since he doesn't have a family again. She then breaks it to him.
I killed them. I killed my family.
That his son is barely alive. Immediately, Nick yanks the drip off his body and hurries out of the ward, looking for his son.
Where's my son?
You need to get back to bed.
Tell me where my son is!
And after a few directions, he finds Lucas in a coma. Curious, he asks the doctor if Lucas will wake up, but the doctor is uncertain. Nick then tells Jessica that the equation couldn't be balanced, and sometimes it would result into chaos.
I'd like a minute with him.
With that, he asks for privacy, and he kneels by his son's bed, pleading for him to respond. He starts by narrating how he thought Lucas would be like Brendan when they first had him, but he turned out to be more like Helen.
I love your brother. I love your mother. I love our family.
He then tells Lucas that he loves him, Helen, and Brendan, and he's sorry for not being able to protect them. He kisses Lucas's head, and then makes up his mind to focus on revenge, after waiting for a while for Nick to come out. Jessica checks Lucas's ward and sees that he's nowhere to be found, so she goes to the bathroom and realizes that he escaped through the window. Still in the room, she notices Lucas moving his fingers, as if he's about to get out of a coma, so she calls the attention of the doctor. Nick, on the other hand, heads home in the rain and tries to cover his wounds. He then calls someone to check the phone number he dialed in the office. Next, he heads out to withdraw a lot of cash, and then his informant tells him that the line he called is from a bar. Minutes later, Nick goes to the bar and asks for Billy Darley or his friend's location, but the bartender and the assistant refuse to give him any details.
I'm looking for Billy Darley or any of his friends.
Believing that he cannot speak Spanish, Nick then offers them money, but they remain adamant. But after speaking Spanish and threatening them,
Back it up!
they offer up one of Billy's boys' locations. Before leaving, he asks them where he can buy guns, and they point him to Billy's father. Bones Darley's workplace. Nick goes there right after,
I came from the Four Roses.
and Bones cautiously asks who he is. But after revealing his bag of cash, the geezer shows him a collection of Glocks at his disposal. Amongst them, Nick picks a shotgun and one of the others. Bones then charges him $3,000, but Nick pays him $5,000. Bones then gives him extra accessories
You think about asking me where Billy is.
and a bag to keep the gun out of sight. But as Nick walks out of the office, Bones clicks a gun at him, asking him if he's the one after his son. Nick confirms it, and Bones lets him walk away under the condition that he doesn't ask him for Billy's whereabouts. Later at the garage, Nick reads the gun manual and loads them with bullets. He then takes off the bandage on his head, revealing the scar from the bullet wound, so he shaves the hair on his head and practices how to reload his guns very fast. After getting the hang of it, he takes Brendan's jacket and prepares for the showdown. That night, Nick storms into Billy's henchman's apartment, and the lackey is shocked that Nick is alive. Before he can reach the gun, Nick shoots at him, and then demands their base and Billy's location. So he calls Billy with the lackey's phone and shoots the underling dead for Billy to hear. Right after, Bones shows up and nags at Billy for the trouble he has caused so far. Fed up with his father's bullshit and having a huge pain to deal with, Billy sends Bones to his grave with a bullet and drives Bones' car to their base. Meanwhile, Nick waits in a vehicle for one of Billy's gang and rams him to death with the vehicle. He then takes out his ammunition and enters into the hideout, shooting everything that moves on sight. With one fire from his shotgun, Nick separates body parts and lives from the bodies of his victims. He then hunts them one by one and eliminates all the men across his path. Billy finally arrives like a bad boss and sees his men laid sprawled on the floor like rag dolls. Still, he proceeds without caution, looking for his nemesis. Without a fear in the world, he follows the sound of the gunshots heard above. Nick, however, looks around for Billy, and when he finally meets him, the two of them greet each other with bullets. Unfortunately, Nick gets shot in the leg from behind by one of Billy's lackeys, the delivery guy, but he shoots the thug down. As a result, he gets shot in the neck. Still, he wounds Billy's right arm, shooting off the gun in the process. Billy, on the other hand, empties his bullets, but doesn't have a lethal shot at Nick, so he sits by his side and tells Nick that he's like one of them, and he made him that. Nick then surprises him by revealing another gun he has with him and asks him English or Spanish. The following morning, Nick leaves the hideout and drives back home. He struggles to the living room and sits on the couch. The cops arrive later, and Jessica sees him watching his family tapes while bleeding from his neck. She tells him that Lucas has started moving, and it's likely he'll pull through. The end. Thank you for sticking to the end of my video. Please do me the biggest favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.